So the Lebanese resistance group, Hezbollah, what they did is they fired a volley, a barrage of 60 Katyusha rockets at the Israelis in the Golan Heights in Syria. So remember, the Golan Heights have been illegally occupied by Israel since 1967. UN Security Council Resolution 242 and others specifically call on the Israelis, demand that the Israelis leave Jerusalem, the West Bank, the Golan Heights, and also separate resolutions say that their annexation of these territories is also illegal, right, in 1980 and 81. So, this is Syria. It's Syria. But the Israelis occupy it. Just like they've stolen all of Palestine, they've stolen bits of Syria and the resources therein as well. And what Hezbollah did today is they fired at the Golan Heights, which are occupied by the Israelis. And there's this footage filmed by them. Take a look.
Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. My dog.
Yo. עולה בראש באמא שלי.
מה עושים?
אמא, אני אדבר איתך, אבל הכל טוב, אמא.
תביא לי את קשר לאמא שלי.
They don't seem too happy about it. They seem rather distressed, as a matter of fact. I recommend that they perhaps withdraw to their original countries. Maybe that would, alleviate the problem. Because after all, Israelis put themselves at risk by stealing other people's land. When you steal their land, they get angry. Isn't that understandable? So here are the Golan Heights. Okay, I'm zooming out a little bit. The Israelis, they are fighting here in the south in Gaza, and then to the north, they are fighting both Syria and Lebanon. Right, so they're really not in a good situation. They are not only losing morally on the world stage, but they're militarily screwed. And if you look at, of course, Hezbollah's capabilities, Hezbollah have been firing drones, as have the Iraqi resistance, all the way to Eilat, to this port city. Not to mention that Yemen are down here blockading it. I mean, talk about royally screwed. Talk about being royally screwed. So today what Hezbollah did is they fired from Lebanon into the Golan Heights. Again, you can see these dotted lines here. These are the illegally occupied Golan Heights. Now Trump, who again, people think that Trump is different from Biden. He is absolutely not different from Biden. He's the same as Biden. And when he was president, he did several favors for Israel that no US president has ever done. So actually, Donald Trump is more of a Zionist than all US presidents before him. He made sure that he moved the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. So he not only broke with long-standing US policy, but he also violated numerous UN Security Council resolutions that deemed Israel's annexation of Jerusalem illegal. Their presence in Jerusalem also illegal. So he violated what the United States had committed itself to, moved the embassy there. He also did the Abraham Accords, and then he also, he decided that the Golan Heights, which I'm talking about right now, are apparently Israeli, like as if they belong to him. Well, they don't belong to him. They belong to Syria. But he said that the State Department from now on would draw maps that say that the Golan Heights are part of Israel and not Syria. So he basically okayed Israel's theft, its annexation of a chunk of Syria that is enormously strategic militarily, full of resources, and simply in violation of international law and certified by Security Council resolutions. So he is a bastard, in short. He is no different from Biden. Make no mistake. So, and this is proven by the fact Biden has kept all of these decisions, never changed them. If you look at the Golan Heights, the Lebanese fired over here from Lebanon into the Golan Heights, and it really shows you how screwed the Israelis are, because they cannot sustain a conflict on multiple fronts. Any tactician knows that in a war, you always want to keep things on one front. It's never a good idea to be attacked or to start a war on two fronts. Never mind 6 fucking fronts. I mean, remember, the Israelis are fighting on 6 fronts. They're fighting in Gaza, they're fighting in the West Bank, they're fighting Syria, they're fighting Lebanon, and they're also fighting Iraq, and they're fighting Yemen. They are royally screwed. They don't explain this to you as lucidly and as clearly as I do, but I do. They are really screwed, and the Americans with them, of course. And that's why they have been unable to break the siege in Yemen. They have been unable to stop drones and rockets coming from Hezbollah, from Syria, from Yemen, from Iraq. They have been unable to dismantle any part or portion of Hamas's infrastructure. They've been unable to crush the resistance in the West Bank also. They have been totally incapable and incompetent. And not only are they losing support internationally, not only is Israel's image, if it had one, gone down the toilet, but they simply have failed to achieve a single military objective. And this is proven by the fact that no hostages have been rescued, and the resistance has coalesced behind the Palestinians. Now, make no mistake, it always has. But the fact that their weapon systems, their ordnance and payloads have all been upgraded during the last years. 2006 was a beatdown for the Israelis. I remember that. Even back then, you would see these images on TV of the Hezbollah fighters coming up from the tunnels. And they would give the Israelis PTSD, and they would start dreaming about ghosts killing them, And now you're seeing the same thing like on steroids in Gaza. The way that Hamas have prosecuted this war is formidable. I mean, these are guerrilla tactics that will be studied in future colleges and military schools for eons, without question. No one, as far as I know, has ever undertaken such a successful guerrilla warfare campaign as have the Hamas fighters. And there are many contenders for that position, namely the Vietnamese, the Afghans, the Taliban, and so on. But nevertheless, the fact that they are not just doing well in Gaza, but that they are backed by Iran, they are backed by Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, the West Bank. I mean, how can you win? You can't win. This is a losing war. It's a losing war. It's ironic because Syria actually has had a lot of trouble with the Israelis, because you see the Golan Heights, they're in a very strategic position overlooking the Sea of Galilee, and then of course over in Commentator and Damascus. So the Israelis, what they will do every 2 weeks is they'll go and launch an airstrike and bomb Damascus airport, or they'll go and bomb Quneitra or bomb some other part of Syria, and they'll usually do it through Lebanese airspace, or they'll go over, as I said, they'll use the Golan Heights as a staging ground, to put it quite simply, Israel has been like a cancer that Syria has been unable to get rid of, like a tumor. And actually, you can use this for the whole Middle East. Israel was planted on purpose by the West as a cancer, as a tumor, to plague the Middle East. How can you have peace in the Middle East when you have a bunch of Europeans that do nothing but starve Arabs and murder Arabs? You will never have peace, because these people are thieves. They steal land, they steal resources, they bomb and kill people all the time. So it was done on purpose by the West, and they're controlled and funded and allies of the West, right? So the problem with Syria is that they were in a very tricky position, because they were able to fight off Al-Qaeda, they were able to fight off ISIS, and take back most of the territory, but unable to get rid of the Israelis. This has been the case since 1967, and further exacerbated by the war. Syria is running on low fuel. It's on an empty tank. There's no food. There's the United States are burning the crops, stealing the crops, stealing the oil as well, basically destroying the economy, starving Syrians. You've got Syria carved up in 4 pieces, basically: the Americans, Turks, Israelis, and then what the government control, and not to mention ISIS. So to have Hezbollah, to have Iran, to have Yemen, not just backing the Palestinians, but this is also favorable for Syria. This takes a little bit of the weight off of Syria, not too much, significantly, but the fact that the Israelis are now worried more about Hezbollah and Hamas than they are about making life hell for Syrians, even though this is still the case, it does take a little bit of weight off of Syria, and this war is going to have unforeseen consequences for everyone, good and bad, right? For example, would any of you have guessed that today in 2024, or at the end of 2023, that you would see such a resistance mounted against the Israelis? Obviously, you can look at what the situation in Gaza and say the Israelis are starving them and murdering them, and you would be absolutely correct. But on the battlefield, when I say the battlefield, I don't mean because there are 2 wars in Gaza. There's Israel's war on the civilians, and then there's the real war with men. That they have to fight against actual soldiers. Israel is losing that. they are losing that war. Sorry, I've stuck up my fingers here. But they're losing that conflict, and they're losing it on 6 fronts. And you know, seeing these attacks, and a few weeks ago, there was also the Meron base, which the Lebanese resistance hit, which is at a peak inside of occupied Palestine that the Israelis control. It's one of their most important radar electronic warfare bases. And they use it, of course, for drone strikes and Air Force missions. So the Lebanese hit that with a volley of 80 rockets. About, I think, 60 of them hit on target. So, you know, it's no wonder that you see Israelis fleeing. It's no wonder that 300,000 of them in the north, if you look at the map again. So there's Lebanon. In the north here, the Israelis have created a buffer zone. There's about it's about 10 kilometers deep. It changes depending how the winds are blowing. But you know, the settlers there have been evacuated, and it's the first time that Israelis are really getting a taste of what it feels like to be displaced by war, internally displaced by war. Now, again, they're being put up in hotels, so they're living a cushy, you know, laid back existence. But Palestinians, on the other hand, they're in the streets. Or living sleeping on the streets rather, so you can't even compare it. But nevertheless, they are displaced. They're not in their homes. And it's not that I wish that on anyone, but as I said, for the first time, Israelis get a taste of their own medicine. They have done this to everyone around them, and now it's happening to them, albeit on a smaller scale. And then, of course, some of them are leaving the country. So it's not only you have 300,000 internally displaced, and it's funny, I posted about this on Twitter, and then some fucking these Zionist trolls who control the community notes, it make me laugh so much. It's so funny. They try to come and like correct what I said by saying, well, no, those are internally displaced. Absolutely not. You have two figures here. You have 300,000 Israelis inside Israel that have been displaced, and you have 500,000 Israelis that have fucked off back to Europe. So those are two separate figures, and they come from the Israelis themselves. And that is, I mean, a damning consequence of the war. It turns out that when you steal someone else's country, if your life is at risk, you don't really want to fight. Oh, I see. Guess what? That's the drive that Palestinians do have in them. Israelis don't. Of course, you know, you have another passport and you can just go to the airport, you're going to leave. And you saw that on October 7th itself. Many of them were fleeing. Now, Palestinians don't have that option because they're Palestinian. They don't have another country. They're not colonizers. But here, when you look at the situation, you know, it's very, very damning. And the economy is also being destroyed by what Hezbollah are doing, as is the case with Hamas in the West Bank, the factions in the West Bank. Because the Israeli economy, for example, you have 18% of the workforce that aren't coming to work since October 7th, right? 18%. You also have a portion of the Israeli economy that relies on slavery, basically. You know, it's a form of slavery where they have, they've taken Palestine, they've invaded it, and they subjugate the Palestinians and use them for their economy, right? So a Palestinian person, for example, who works in quote-unquote Israel, is usually someone who literally doesn't have a choice. They need to put food on the table. The Israelis take advantage of that by giving them some measly, garbage job, where they're humiliated with checkpoints. They're humiliated by border crossings and having to, being searched and all this colonial crap and occupation crap. And since October 7th, what happened is the Israelis shot themselves in the foot by banning anyone from Gaza from crossing into Israel to work and serve their Zionist masters. The poor Goyim had nowhere to work anymore. And not only that, but there's some men. So what happened is the Israelis closed the crossing and some men were picked up by the Israelis and tortured for weeks. I mean, the most horrific stuff. They cut off some guy's leg. They shot him in the leg and then cut it. I mean, like, it had to be amputated because they shot him. So they screwed him twice. That's one example, and it was on the BBC. If you don't believe me, right? If you only like mainstream brainwashing media, go ahead and look at the BBC. They'll tell you the same thing. And in addition to that, in the north, which I come back to Lebanon, I come back to Hezbollah. They have wreaked havoc on the Israeli economy through this, because when you have so many Israelis displaced that need to be put up in hotels, 300 goddamn thousand people. Do you know how much that costs to put these people, first of all, to get them out of the houses? You got to pay all the soldiers overtime to go to every house and check that they've left the houses. Then you have to get buses. You got to pay the bus drivers and the bus company to rent buses. Then you need to bring everybody, you need ushers to get everybody in line and actually make sure they board the buses and get all their luggage on board. Then you have to drive the buses down to the hotels. You got to reserve hotel rooms and pay for them to stay there indefinitely. I mean, the money that they are losing because of this successful campaign prosecuted by Hezbollah is colossal. So some people think that, well, Hezbollah are not doing enough. They're doing all they can. Anything else, any more would be escalation at this point. There's a difference between doing your best and escalating. Obviously Hezbollah can just grab everything they have and fire it. They can take all their fireworks and just, light them. But that's not going to achieve anything over a long-term period. On the contrary, by responding but without escalating, what they've done is they basically drawn the Israelis into a trap, because the Israelis, obviously, they're also firing back. They're bombing Lebanon. They're killing journalists, killing people. But they're not doing it. They're not incurring the same economic damage and disruptions that Hezbollah have incurred on the Israelis. They just aren't inflicted on the Israelis. What Israel is incurring, these damages to the economy, to the fabric of Israel itself. If you're a settler colony and the colonizers are leaving the country, well, you don't really have a future, do you? So you need to have settlers, otherwise there's no colony. So the fact that so many are displaced and are leaving the country is a death blow to the fabric of Zionism itself. So I'm explaining this to tell you that Hezbollah are actually doing, from a military, a strategic, economic point of view, all of these factors, they are actually doing a lot. It's just you don't hear about it because the Israelis are so fucking embarrassed and they are so, they're stupefied. They don't know what to do, that you don't hear about this. You hear a bit about Yemen. You hear a bit about Hezbollah, but not that much. If I was getting rockets fired at me every day and all my electronic warfare posts are getting taken out, I'd be screaming about it. The Israelis, they talk about Hamas 24/7. How often do you hear them talk about Hezbollah? Hezbollah hitting them every fucking day, and they don't say a word because they're getting screwed on such a level that they don't want to say anything. So anyway, the fact that they're also helping Syria out on the Golan Heights, and the Israelis here, at the first sign of trouble, they're like, oh my God.
My dog.
Once again, it's a very tragic thing that there's all this war happening. It's heartbreaking, of course. There's no need for all of this misery and suffering and starvation. But we have no one to blame but London, Washington, and Tel Aviv. These are the centers of imperial power. These are the people prosecuting this war. They are the ones who have undertaken this campaign of genocide and ethnic cleansing, and they've been doing it for 75 years. It's just that we're waking up to it perhaps a bit more than we would have normally through the advent of smartphones and the internet. So the Israelis have I'm in favor of peace. I support peace, and in my opinion, the most peaceful solution, the best solution for everyone, is the Israelis leave Palestine and Syria and they go home. They go back to Ukraine. They go back to where they came from, because I don't want war. No one wants war. There's no need to fight. Israelis have dual citizenship. Those who don't can get it, right, from their parents or their grandparents' country, and just go home. There's no need to fight. We can only exist on this planet peacefully. You leave Palestine and Palestinians get their country back. It's that simple. And remember, Lebanon is also occupied by the Israelis. So, this chunk here is actually quite funny if you look at the north. You had the UNIFIL mission, which is back in the south. And this is the UNDOF mission. So, basically, they have both of these UN missions for peacekeeping and observer missions by the UN. That helmet right there is from my parents when they were in these two missions. So, what they do is they make sure that the Israelis don't take any more land. Unfortunately, the UN Security Council is not very good at getting back land, but they nevertheless they have said legally, officially, the Israelis have to give back the land. Now with Lebanon, this is funny because there's a chunk that is illegally occupied by Israel, which is very small. It's a bunch of farms, and this didn't belong to the Lebanese originally. It belonged to Syria. But the way they did this is funny. They got the this is basically when they the Syrian government signed they basically signed over the land to Lebanon so that the Israeli presence would be illegal, and it would not just be illegal against Syria but also against Lebanon, right, against a third country, because we know the Israelis are occupying Palestine and Syria illegally, but now it's also Lebanon and in Shebaa farms, and through that they were able to leave weapons behind for Hezbollah, and Hezbollah's turf is the south, right? When we talk about this front here, the south is Hezbollah turf. This is their their spot. Simply, this is where they have the most support, the most infrastructure, where they're based. And don't get me wrong, they have support all over Lebanon. Not all of Lebanon. Obviously it's a very fractured society, unlike Syria, but they do have a lot of support, and they've certainly done a lot more than the Lebanese army. I mean, Lebanon, South Lebanon used to be occupied by the Israelis, a big chunk of it. Now it's just Shebaa farms, but it's a big chunk of South Lebanon that was occupied. That's why they had the UNIFIL mission in the first place. The only ones who liberated it are Hezbollah. You have a lot of armed factions in Lebanon. Everyone has, everyone and their uncle has an RPG. But the only ones that actually kicked out the Israelis were Hezbollah, and then they made sure they didn't come back in 2006. So from a military point of view, they are a superior force. They are a competent military force. They just are. And the fact that they are prosecuting another successful campaign now in this Gaza war is, attests to that. Just a little update I wanted to give you about the other fronts in this war, because everyone talks about Gaza, but this is about Gaza. Gaza has multiple fronts. It's not just in Gaza. This is important to understand.